Hello everyone, GM Philosopher here. Welcome back to GM Philosophy in the morning. Today we're talking about how to make your own module for D&D, how to design your own adventure. What do I look at? What can you look at to actually design an encounter, an adventure, a session from scratch so that it works without over-prepping, without under-prepping, to make sure you're prepared, okay? I'm going to go through this. This is not rocket science. I'm going to tell you how I mentally go through the process of prepping. And it starts with number one, decide on the location, the encounter. Now, if you're just starting the session and you've been playing other sessions, then obviously you're going to be starting in the location that you left off in. If this is session one, you need to decide where you're going to be starting out. So let's just say a tavern. Let's say it's going to be a nice tavern. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to figure out what the name of the tavern is. I'm going to flesh out a little bit of a description, very, very short, for like the barkeeps. Maybe there's like a bartender and then like a barmaid and then maybe there's a stable boy, right? So I'm going to kind of just flesh them out just a little bit. I'm not really going to do a whole lot of work on those characters because I'm going to kind of improvise them, see where we go when we get there. However, I do want to kind of plan ahead by writing a little description of what they look like so that I can be a little more creative with that than just improv. If I just improv all of that, it may be a little stale. So I'm going to, write down a little stuff and I'm going to write down their names. I'm going to find out, figure out some good names for these characters, write them down. So have them in my notebook. Probably use Google Docs and then print the stuff out or keep it on my computer if I'm going to be playing virtually. Now, if I think that the tavern is going to be at all significant, if I think there's going to be anything useful to do there, if there's any possibility that the player characters are maybe going to do something there, which they might, then I'm going to come up with a map for it, okay? So this could be something simple that I put together in Midjourney. I could design this using Incarnate. You could hand draw it, right? There's all kinds of different ways you can do this, but coming up with a map for that initial place, that initial location is not a bad idea. It's actually a pretty good idea. So that's what we're going to come up with. I'm going to have that ready. What else? So we need an encounter. We need a hook, a plot arc. And knowing me, I'm going to throw out a bunch of them. Now, this story, this campaign, this adventure might have a theme. There might be a direction. For example, at session 0, you might have kind of told your player characters that, their characters are going to be receiving a letter that's going to kick off the adventure or something like that. But if, you are just starting a more sandboxy game, then the player characters may not know what to expect, and that's totally fine. So I'm going to whip up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to think up 3 plot arc sort of like magnets, just like hooks, and I'm going to figure out how I want to present these to the player characters. So right offhand, maybe they're going to be approached by someone who says, "You look like a well-to-do bunch of adventurers. I have a little bit of a problem. The local fighters guild is really backed up. It's going to take them months to get to my problem. I have a cave infestation. I have a cave on my property I really like. In fact, I used to give visitors tours of the cave, but now it has been infested by some kind of creature." What kind of creature? Well, maybe I'll get out my monster manual as I'm doing prep. See, I'm going to kind of prep for this. I'm not going to do all the prep for the whole adventure, but I'm going to prep for the hook. Maybe I'll random roll on a monster manual, just see what kind of monsters are taken up in there. Let's just say that it's vampires. There's a coven of vampires, I believe, in my cave. And I also think I might have people around him start to make fun of him, like, "Gerald, there are no vampires in your cave. There are hobos in there, and you are just a scaredy cat," right? So maybe that's like kind of one plot arc. So I'm going to just I'm going to put together some stuff for that. I'm not going to make the vampire stat blocks for that. I'm not going to have a map of the cave yet, right? I'm not going to, flesh out any story really for that, beyond just a little bit of an outline. And the reason for that is because I don't know if the player character is going to care about it. Okay, so that's one thing I want to put out there. Another plot arc I'm going to put out there is I want to start instantly kind of like engaging the player characters. So I'm going to pick one of the player characters and I'm going to have a little orphan boy walk into the tavern while they're there. And the orphan boy, I'm going to have one in particular player character. What I'll do is probably have them all roll perception checks, and the one who rolls the highest notices the boy first, and boom, that'll be the one I'm targeting with this personal plot arc. Now, I want to take a quick little break to remind you that I have a free ebook that I give away. Empowering Game Masters to run better games is the goal of the channel here, and I have a 10-minute GM Mastery Kit ebook, which condenses my 10 number 1 tips from over 20 years of experience running games into a 10-minute read. You can download this for free, read it, level up your next session with this knowledge, and I designed it to be very fast, very easy, very quick for anyone to utilize. So you're going to want to grab that. Links in the description. And hey, listen, if you've already been running games and you are ready to take it to an advanced level, I've recently completed my latest ebook. It's called The Advanced Art of TTRPG Mastery. This is the best book I've ever written about TTRPGs. And basically what it's about is it's all about techniques I've developed philosophies and tactics I've developed over 20 plus years of running games to really get players emotionally invested in your campaign to the point where they're on the edge of their seat with excitement. They have huge buy-in. They are really engaging with your game and empowering yourself to run a game that actually transcends just the game. Your players, instead of just eating pizza and drinking beer and not really being engaged, this book teaches you how to make your games transcend that, take it to a deeper level where your player characters are literally feeling real emotions about the game. Emotionally resonant gameplay is a huge crux, core of the soul of this book. I believe that this book's going to go down as one of the most important books ever written about TTRPGs. So if you're ready to go to an advanced level, you want to really level up your craft, I encourage you to buy this. It's available for a special introductory price right now. You are not going to want to miss this. So I encourage you to grab those 2 ebooks. And now let's get back to the video. But maybe we'll have a boy walk in there, and maybe, the boy will be like a homeless vagabond, and he walks in, he's really hungry, really skinny, and he kind of walks up to the counter and he tries to order food, and he counts a couple little coppers, and the barkeeper's like, well, that's enough for about a half a piece of bread, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you a piece of bread and a bowl of soup. You look awfully hungry. You can sweep the floor for me later, right? But then, like, what I might say is I might have a couple rough-looking adventurers walk up and start hassling this poor little boy, and I'm going to have the character who notices happening, kind of trying to provoke that character to step in and do something about it. And then in my mind, I'm thinking of a story. This boy is like an orphan and he is alone. He lost his parents. Where did you lose them? Well, they just never came home one night. And I sat and waited, and I waited for 2 days. They were coming to town. I live about 5 miles out of town. So I walked here. I don't even have shoes, and you look at his bare feet and they're all dirty. So it's just like this kind of strange story. He's like, they told me they were coming to visit someone for business. And my dad, he strapped his sword to his waist, which was very unusual. He was a warrior back when he was younger, but nowadays he's just a farmer. But him and my mom both came into town, and then I haven't heard from him since, right? So we're going to try to emotionally kind of like evoke feelings in one of the player characters, and we're also going to kind of set up a possible mystery they could, go looking into. We might even connect the vampires in the cave to the missing mom and dad. And I'm already thinking to myself that they're dead, right? The mom and dad are dead. Maybe the husband had a very bad debt he needed to pay off, so he decided to go work for the guy who owns the cave, and he was going to go in and get rid of the pests. He thought they were hobos. Turns out they really were vampires. Maybe he gets turned into a vampire, now he's an evil vampire. Or maybe they kill him, and so when they go in the cave, he'll be hanging from the ceiling or something. So these are just plot arcs I'm throwing out there. See if the player characters are interested at all in any of them. And then I'm going to probably come up with a third plot arc. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have one of the barmaids flirt with one of the characters, and she's going to be like, you look like someone who knows what they're doing. Maybe I'll have all my characters roll percentiles, and I'll just randomly select one that the barmaid is kind of interested in. And maybe she drops hints that she works here. This is not what she wants to do with her life. She longs to be an adventurer. She's very good at sewing. She's very good at cooking. She can do some minor herbology. Maybe she's been practicing with her bow, right? And so she's going to kind of flirt and be like, are you looking for a helping hand? I would love to apply. I would not be expensive. Wink, wink, right? So, I'm just throwing some stuff out there, making it interesting. And then here's another thing I want to plan out. And see, this is good that I'm talking through this, because originally I kind of said that I'm not going to make a map of this tavern. But now as I'm talking through this, I'm realizing, and this is good, this is what we do a little session prep for. As I'm talking through this, I'm realizing, I think that I want to have the combat of the session happen in this tavern. This is what I want. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find something, and this is going to be kind of thrust upon the player characters. This is going to be something that they're not necessarily going to choose. It's going to happen to them. And I'm going to look in their backstories for the person who has the best candidate, like backstory story to fit this. But I kind of want a group of riders to ride up to the tavern partway through the session and swagger in looking for one of the players. Like someone is hunting them. Maybe a group of cold, dark mercenaries wearing black cloaks, armed to the teeth, right? And so maybe a group of them that is relatively well matched to fight the group. That one adventurer would be maybe in trouble, but the whole group together, all the player characters, there could be definitely a stand made, probably be victorious, right? So this would be a fun first session combat. But I have to go look in the backstory, kind of come up with a story, and then I'm gonna vaguely flesh out all of the members of that warring party, like the mercenary group or the dark riders who are riding in hunting that player character. So I'm gonna come up with like a gruff warrior leader, and then he's gonna have like an archer, and he's gonna have a spellcaster. He's gonna have a couple, like basically fighters. So I'm gonna kind of come up with physical descriptions for them, and I'm gonna come up with their names and a general 1 or 2 or 3 sentence description of kind of their mannerisms, like shy and notices things faster than the others, leader is extremely grumpy, gruff, tends to speak boldly and boisterously before he really does much thinking about things, kind of like pride getting in the way. Cold, calculated female elven archer has a religious pendant around her neck. Wild, chaotic sorceress who loves to talk smack and tends to find like one person on the other side and focus in on them, usually the spellcaster, and likes to hurl fireballs and whatnot at them, or, basically hurling damage dealing spells. So, I'm going to kind of flesh out this other group and how they fit into that backstory, probably hired by someone in the backstory. They probably aren't directly referenced. So it's going to be kind of like an offshoot, like a second or third party. And that'll be the combat. So now when I bring that up, I'm going to want a map of the tavern, because the player characters are probably going to be there for a minute, because there's this guy who's going to try to hire them with the cave situation. And this little boy is going to be there. And then there's going to be this barmaid flirting with one of them. Right. And I don't know if they're going to accept or reject any of these plot hooks. I've not, for all I know, they're going to thump the boy over the head. They're going to rob the tavern. They're going to kill the guy who's trying to hire them to flush the vampires out of the caves. And they're going to take the barmaid with them as a hostage, and they're going to burn the tavern down. For all I know, that's what's going to happen. You never know, right? But at least there'll be things that they can interact with, right? And that's what we're going for. That's why I'm not going to do a ton of work fleshing out any single one of these plot arcs or all of them, because you just don't know what's going to happen, right? And if I do hours of prep work on all these things, and then the players just say, "I'm not interested. Get out of here, dude. Like we're not gonna clean out your cave for you." Well, then all that time will be spent on something that wasn't going to get used. Besides, improvising as you go, I think provides for a fresher experience, because you let the players push that narrative. So I'm only kind of creating these things to show them, and then we're going to see what happens after I show it to them. See if they bite or not, and how they bite, and that might dictate where I go. Plus, I'll get like really good inspiration as I go. As I play through these things, I'll probably get really fun inspiration for a good way to role play the barmaid, or a good way to role play the dude who owns the cave. Maybe I'll develop a nervous tick for him or something. But the banter and the back and forth you have with your players sometimes serves as really great creative fuel for how to do that. So I'm going to prepare those things, but then I'm going to have this group come to the tavern partway through. And actually, this can be a good mechanism to kind of put an abrupt pause on what's going on. So let's say, for example, the player characters are talking to the guy in the cave, and they're talking to the little boy, and then the barmaid situation is going on, and they're eating their dinner, right? But let's say things are starting to kind of grind down to a halt a little bit, or let's just say that things are really starting to get interesting. Maybe they actually have emotional buy-in. Maybe the one player actually likes the barmaid and is trying to hire her and get her to come with them, or is hitting on her too. Or maybe the boy, maybe they're really developing kind of we want to help this boy kind of mentality. And then in the door walks these mercenaries, and then they kind of fan out, and they all put their hands on their weapons. The music stops, and they're like, "We don't want to interrupt your dinner. We're here looking for someone." And they're going to name drop the player whose backstory they're from. And they're going to say, "We represent name drop something from their backstory. All we need is to bring them in." And then they're going to go look around, and then they're going to set their gaze right on the player character. And then the elven archer is going to be like, "That's him. I recognize him from the description." Right. So we have this like situation now getting thrust upon the players. Like they don't really have a choice to bite on this one. They could choose to run, they can choose to fight, they can choose to try to talk, but this situation is coming to them one way or another. And so that's why I want to have a map of this tavern now that I think about it. I think we need to have a good map of this. So then I'm going to go to Incarnate. I'm actually going to probably start Midjourney, get Midjourney to spit out a good starting place for a tavern map, and then I'll use Incarnate to like fix places that don't work and put extra details in. And then we'll have a nice tavern map. That'll be pretty cool. And so we'll have that ready, because the combat will necessitate a map if we're playing on VTT. If we're playing in person, I may just use my hex grid and draw the tavern. I usually just hand draw the maps when I play in person, and I think it's kind of fun. But on VTT, I always use, like a VTT map, try to do a really high quality map. And to be really honest, now that I've thought through how this first session is going to go, kind of how I want to go, the primary thing I'm going to be spending time on is the loadouts for these mercenary people who are coming after the players. So I'm going to literally build stat blocks for them. I'm going to plan out what weapons and items they have, how much gold they have on them, what armor they're wearing. That's going to take up the predominant amount of my prep time, because that's going to give me the biggest bang for my buck for having a really immersive combat. It's going to be really fun if the players know, oh, these were like planned out. One of them's wearing chainmail, one's wearing leather, one has a magic ring, right? One of them has a +1 magic sword. I'm going to plan out the sorcerer's spells so that they're very specific to that character. It's going to be very fun. I might ask ChatGPT to give me some suggestions, and then I'm going to take that and I'm going to put my own spin on it, and then finish creating them. And I might even give them some homebrew things. Sometimes with like, fighters and things like that, I kind of like to homebrew interesting things. Like maybe the leader, I'll give him a couple of homebrewed maneuvers to really kind of surprise the players, throw some elements into combat that they wouldn't have seen coming, that kind of thing. So we'll just see what happens. And then that's all I'm going to prep. I'm not going to prep anything else other than like maybe having a map of the world or a map of the greater area that they're going to be in, just as a general rule. Like a map, whether or not they see the map depends on whether that would make sense. If they all have a knowledge of the area, then yeah, they would have access to the map. If they're like brand new to this place and they've never been here, maybe they don't know what's where until they find a map that can actually read it. So maybe they have to find a cartographer or go to the library or see if the local sheriff has a map or something, because maps don't just grow on trees in a fantasy setting. Sometimes it's actually a little work. Those are going to be the things that I'm going to plot out, and then that's all I'm going to plan out. That is it. And then I'm just going to let the player characters make the choices as I put these things in front of them, and I'm going to let them push the narrative, and then we're going to see how it goes down. I'm going to try to find a good place to end it, maybe after the fight or whatever. As we near the end of the game, I might plan out like a cliffhanger to try to set up the next episode. However, I'm not going to do too much thinking about that before, because a lot of times I want to use inspiration from the game to set up the cliffhanger for the next one. So maybe they kill all of the mercenary group, people who are coming after them, and then they take the boy and the barmaid and they run for the caves, right? Maybe the boy and the barmaid help them fight the mercenaries during the fight. That'll probably happen. A lot of these things will happen. Maybe the cave owner guy was like hiding behind the bar, and then he pops out when it's toward the end, and he's like, okay, I'll double it. I'll pay you double. Now that I've seen what you can do, I know you'll succeed. I know it. So maybe he offers to double the amount of money to pay them to clean out the caves. So they're going to go do that. So maybe though, as they ride away, I plan out some kind of like cliffhanger. Like maybe the sorcerer girl, she's laying there literally dead in a pool of her own blood. The sword was rammed right through her chest, but then suddenly they see the blood start to suck back up into her, and the wound on her chest closes mysteriously, and then her eyes jolt open with magical fire inside of them, and then she seethes with rage, and then she utters one word, the name of the player character who they were initially hunting, and then we fade to black. Right. So maybe setting something up like, why did she come back to life? How did she do that? What is going on with her? Right. So this kind of sets up an interesting cliffhanger for the next session. I always like to end things on a cliffhanger, get players really pumped for the next session next week. So boom, that is how I would begin designing a module or a group or a session for my group. You don't have to go overboard. As you can see, the details that I'm putting in there are pretty minor. I'm not doing a ton of work, but I am thinking through how I kind of want the session to roll, and I am going to flesh out the things I know are going to be important, and I'm going to kind of just leave the rest to improvisation, right? Sometimes it doesn't go exactly that way, even if they leave the tavern early, I know this mercenary group is hunting them, so they're going to show up in the session. That's going to be the combat. One way or another, they're going to encounter them. So I can safely plot them out knowing it's probably not going to be wasted time. The player characters might be able to talk their way out of it. So all the stats and stuff may not be necessary, but it'll probably be necessary, right? You always want to leave a door open for your players to find creative ways to like get out of situations or circumvent combat, or your players might find really cool things. By the time the players are done talking, maybe it turns out that they're joining forces with the mercenaries to defeat the cave vampires first. And then the mercenaries are thinking, we're going to double cross them when we're done. And the player characters are thinking, we're going to double cross them when we're done. So that could be a fun thing. Whatever. I don't know. Right. So you just never know what's going to happen. But I do know I want to throw some plot hooks out there, keep it simple, keep it very straightforward. Don't know if the players are going to bite. I want to leave lots of room for improvisation, and I'm going to put together the things I know are going to be useful, like the map of the tavern and the enemy mercenary group, and that's what I'd prep. And once I get done with those things, I'd call it done and just look forward to the game and have a ton of fun improvising as we go through. And it'll be messy and imperfect at points, and that is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you resonate with this. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. Empowering game masters to run better games is our goal here. I'll see you awesome people on the next one.